A black female Air Force officer returns to her childhood neighborhood after years away, hoping for nothing more than a peaceful walk down the street that raised her. But a local cop singles her out, eyeing her with suspicion, provoking and posturing, all because she doesn't look like she fits in. Tension rises fast. Words get sharp. Ego slams into calm resolve. A crowd gathers. She doesn't flinch. She stands firm. And within minutes, that cop gets the kind of wake-up call that echoes down the block. In Greenville, Mississippi, the summer heat pressed down like a wet wool blanket, clinging to skin and slowing time. The sky dipped toward dusk, casting a golden haze over cracked sidewalks and sagging porches, softening edges that life had made hard. A lone dog barked, sharp and distant. The smell of barbecue floated from a backyard, laced with the sweetness of fading magnolias. Captain Talia Monroe walked alone, her boots landing soft but firm on the uneven concrete. Each step was steady, chosen, deliberate. Just 2 hours off a bus, she'd swapped her uniform for civvies at the depot and chosen to walk the 6 blocks to her mother's old home. A car would have been easy, but she didn't want to float past it all. She needed to feel the pavement, see what had changed and what hadn't. It had been 8 years. The block felt frozen, untouched. Rusted chain-link fences. Screen doors patched in duct tape. Lawns with sun-bleached plastic chairs arranged like someone might still come by and sit. Every detail whispered old memories. The church on the corner still had that janky sign. God don't sleep, so you shouldn't sin. She used to laugh at that. Now, she only managed a tight smile. Something about the light felt different, slower maybe. It gave the chipped paint on every house a sort of weathered dignity. Above her, sneakers still dangled from power lines, swaying faintly in the dead air, a symbol, a message, maybe a warning. She wasn't in uniform, but it didn't matter. You could see it in her walk, the squared shoulders, the forward lean, like she was still ready to carry a rucksack. Her gaze moved sharp and clean, scanning corners, rooftops, windows. Not paranoid, just trained. The worn duffel on her hip bounced with each step as she passed the corner store. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed above. A few teenagers leaned against the wall, sipping sodas, half watching the street. One of them, tall and lean, narrowed his eyes at her. "You military?" he asked, not rude, just wary. Talia paused. Not in shock, but struck by how easily people still saw through her. "Still am," she said, her voice low, calm. He nodded, slow, respectful. "My cousin's a Marine. Walks like you, like he's got somewhere to be, even if he doesn't." Before she could answer, another kid called him back into the store. The moment passed, but it stuck, like a bell's ring after the bell's gone. Talia exhaled deep. That's what she fought for. Not the medals, not the flag, but this, being seen and not feared. She rounded the corner near her old elementary school, spotting the familiar chimney of her mom's house in the distance. That's when she heard it. The low roll of tires, slow, unnatural. She didn't look back, just kept walking, eyes forward, shoulders firm. But her breath changed. The sound crept closer. Intentional. A black and white cruiser glided alongside the curb, slow and heavy, like a predator stalking. It matched her pace. Didn't pass. Didn't fall behind. She felt it before she saw it, the weight of a stare trying to shrink her in place. Then came the telltale hum of a window sliding down. "Hey you. Mississippi, stop right there." She stopped. Turned slowly, not fully, just enough to see. The man in the driver's seat was exactly the kind she'd learned to read early in life. Officer Craig Denham. Square jaw. Flushed face. Mirrored aviators. Even with the sun dipping low, no longer a threat to vision, he wore those shades like armor. He looked like someone who lifted weights not for fitness, but for intimidation. One hand hung lazily out the window, fingers tapping a rhythm of boredom. Talia's gut coiled, not with fear, but with readiness. This wasn't a traffic stop. It wasn't routine. It was a test, one she never signed up for. His eyes scanned her like she was a riddle he didn't trust. "You live around here?" His tone was clipped, dismissive. I did, she answered evenly. Grew up 2 blocks that way. He squinted, annoyed. Don't remember seeing you. Doesn't mean I wasn't here. A pause stretched out, heavy and thick like the heat. She held his gaze, calm, eyes unblinking. What's your name? It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. She knew that tone. Heard it in airports, on deployments, at checkpoints in countries that couldn't pronounce her name. But it always hit harder when it came from home. Captain Talia Monroe. United States Air Force. Something flickered behind his shades. Disbelief? Disgust? You military? He asked, head tilted like the thought itself offended him. That's right. I just told you I am. His lip curled into a smirk. Ugly. Got some ID to prove that, Captain? Talia pulled her wallet from her back pocket, slid out her military ID, and held it up, not close enough to be grabbed, just close enough to read. He leaned in, peered through the windshield, then let out a low chuckle. Fancy little card, he muttered. I've seen people fake better. She didn't move, didn't react. You expect me to believe you're some kind of officer? His voice oozed sarcasm, thick as oil. You don't look like no Air Force anything. The line hit like a stone dropped in still water. Her jaw tightened, not in shock, not even in anger. Just bone-deep weariness. The kind that builds up when you're never just seen, only assessed, questioned, challenged. She said nothing, because now she knew. And more importantly, so did he. She held steady. The card didn't waver. Sunlight caught the lamination and flicked it like a blade. His eyes weren't reading the card. They were reading her skin, posture, expression. Denham didn't need verification. He wasn't here for facts. He was here for something else. Control. Power. Permission to assert. His fingers tapped the car door slowly, like he was deciding whether she was worth the paperwork or just another line on a shift report. You know, he drawled, shifting in his seat. You people always gotta turn everything into a damn show. All that attitude. All that pride. Strutting around like the world owes you something. Talia's grip on the ID stayed light, but her pulse kicked. You people. A slap without the hand. Expected, but no less cutting. I don't need the world to owe me anything, she said, voice smooth, cool as glass. I've earned every step I've taken, including this one. Denham exhaled hard through his nose. Her calm rattled him more than rage ever could. So where you headed, Captain? He sneered, mocking the title like it tasted bad. Marching around here like you're lead in a damn parade. I told you. I'm walking home. My mother's house, 6 blocks up. He tilted his head. Funny. Don't look like anybody's daughter from around here. He sneered. Folks from this block don't usually come back dressed like they own the place. The air thickened. The sun, once golden and forgiving, now pressed down like judgment. Even the wind went still. Even the insects quieted. Talia didn't blink. His words weren't about her outfit. They were about belonging. And his verdict was clear. She didn't look small enough. Didn't look humble enough. Didn't look like she knew her place. Her silence was solid. Unshaken. I didn't realize confidence was a crime, she said, voice smooth as polished stone. Denham's jaw twitched. That hit the nerve. The one he'd been poking, trying to rattle her, push her down a notch. Instead, she was matching him, move for move, word for word, without ever breaking her calm. You know what I think, he said, stepping out of the cruiser. The car door groaned open with a metallic clunk. I think you're hiding something. Talia's body shifted, not a flinch, not something a camera would catch. But there, in the subtle drop of her center of gravity, the quiet readiness of a soldier who's heard the engine falter midair. You've seen my ID, she said. I've told you who I am. I've broken no laws. If there's a cause, state it. If not, you don't get to decide how this plays out. I do decide, he snapped, jabbing a thick finger toward her. Not here. Not with me. Across the sidewalk, eyes were gathering. A couple of teenagers. A woman with a stroller. A man on a porch rail, arms folded. Phones slowly rose like flowers toward a brighter truth. Denham saw it. Felt it. His spine stiffened. Suddenly his voice grew louder, performative. "This is a lawful stop," he barked. "You're refusing to comply with a direct order." Talia turned slightly, sweeping her gaze across the space, not looking for escape, just noting exits, calculating. Her voice remained steady, anchored. "You have no cause, no complaint, no suspicion. You're turning a peaceful walk into something else, and you know it." Denham's face twisted. "And now you're throwing legalese at me like you're some damn lawyer?" "I'm an officer in the United States military," she said. "I know my rights." "That's so," he said, voice dropping. "Darker now." "Well, out here, sweetheart, your rights don't mean much when your mouth writes, checks your body can't cash." She didn't reply. But behind her eyes, something sparked. Not fear. Not even fury. Precision. He stepped in. Too close. "I'm going to need to see that ID in my hand now." Still, she didn't move. The card stayed where it was, steady in her grip. And there it was. The shift. That tiny atmospheric crack where everything tilts. The moment she'd seen before in headlines, in shaky cell phone videos, in eulogies. The moment where dignity is supposed to yield to authority. But she didn't. She held his gaze, voice quiet but clear. "You don't get to put your hands on me just because you're uncomfortable with who I am." His eyes narrowed. His voice, now just a whisper. "Uncomfortable," he hissed. "I don't get uncomfortable. I correct people who forget their place." The crowd behind her froze. Even the wind seemed to wait. Talia's voice was velvet steel. "Then maybe it's time you learned where yours is." And just like that, the line was drawn. Denham's breath caught, not from anger, but something deeper. Wounded pride. Not because she yelled, she hadn't raised her voice once, but because she didn't bend. She didn't flinch. And that was what he couldn't tolerate. He stepped forward, closing the space. His boot was nearly touching hers. His shadow cast across her features, but she didn't blink. She was still, but not passive. Coiled. Watching. Calculating every muscle twitch, every possible outcome, like a chessboard mid-game. "You're gonna regret this little attitude," Denham muttered, low and close. "I'm giving you one last chance to cooperate before this turns into something else." Talia tilted her head slightly, studying him. Her eyes were unreadable. "Come. You think I'm afraid of you? That did it." His mask cracked, not a break, just a fracture. But enough. Enough to show what was bubbling beneath. Frustration, maybe fear. He wasn't used to resistance. Especially not in public. The crowd had grown. A young woman near the bus stop stood steady, her phone raised, recording. Across the street, a man had frozen mid-stride, arms folded, watching. His sides like live wires, but he didn't move. Couldn't. Not with the crowd watching, not with every lens aimed and every witness alert. His authority, once absolute in that uniform, had cracked like thin glass under weight it couldn't bear. He wasn't the enforcer now. He was the spectacle. And Talia? She hadn't laid a finger in aggression, but somehow she'd managed to shift the entire axis of control. Not with brute strength. With presence. With poise. She stood, not triumphant, but resolute, like someone who had long ago made peace with the idea that every street corner might become a proving ground. Her hands were still at her sides, open, non-threatening. But her eyes, those held the kind of power Denham couldn't stomach. The kind that didn't need a badge to command respect. The murmurs behind her were louder now. The energy had changed. The crowd wasn't just observing. They were bearing witness. And with that came a dangerous truth for men like Denham. He was no longer the narrator. He was a character in someone else's recording. Someone else's story. "You need to walk away," Talia said quietly, but there was steel under every syllable. "Before you make this worse for yourself." Denham stared at her. Something desperate flickered in his eyes. He looked past her to the crowd, saw the phones, the faces, the growing tide of judgment. Then back at her, the calm, the restraint, the unbearable lack of fear. And he did what he'd never expected to do. He stepped back. Not far. Just one step. But it was everything. The tension, the taut rope between them, loosened slightly. A breath escaped the block like pressure leaving a sealed room. A woman near the curb muttered, "Damn." She beat him without throwing a punch. Talia didn't respond. She simply lowered her hand, slid her ID back into her pocket, and turned. Not quickly. Not defiantly. Just purposefully. Like the matter was settled. Like she had better places to be. Denham didn't follow. He couldn't. Because now he understood. She hadn't won a fight. She'd ended one he never should have started. Cruz didn't need to ask twice. She'd read the entire scene before the second door, even shut behind her. The body language told the whole story. Talia's unshaken composure, Denham's crumbling control, the wary tension of a crowd that had already chosen its side. Her gaze locked on Denham first, voice calm but laced with warning. "Officer Denham," she said, her tone measured like a tightrope. "Step away." Denham blinked, as if waking from a dream where he still had command. His mouth opened, then closed. Cruz didn't wait. She turned her attention to Talia, and her stance shifted, just slightly. Not deference. Not apology. But recognition. "Captain Talia Grant, is that correct?" she asked, keeping her voice level. Talia nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Cruz's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in assessment. She'd seen officers lose it before. Seen them spiral when challenged, when their illusion of control was peeled back like paint in heat. Denham looked like every man she'd had to write up, pull aside, or quietly transfer before he embarrassed the department more than he already had. She glanced at the crowd, at the phones still recording. Then she turned to Denham again. "You're done here," she said simply. "What?" he snapped, too loud, too desperate. She resisted. She assaulted. She de-escalated. Cruz cut in, voice sharp enough to silence him mid-accusation. "And from what I'm seeing, you escalated. This crowd saw it. Those cameras caught it. So, unless you want to spend the rest of your career as a meme, I suggest you take a breath. Now." A smothered laugh rippled through the onlookers. Denham's face twisted, rage, shame, and the slow, dawning horror of consequences he couldn't control. His hand dropped from the cuffs. His shoulders sagged. Talia didn't gloat. She didn't even glance at the phones. She just gave Cruz a steady nod, respectful but firm. "I appreciate your arrival, Sergeant. I was finishing a run when I was stopped without cause. I provided ID. I remained compliant." Cruz nodded back. "And I'll confirm the body cam footage." She looked pointedly at Denham. "If it's on." Denham didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was damning. Cruz sighed and tapped her shoulder mic. "Dispatch. This is Sergeant Cruz. Scene is under control. No arrests. No injuries. Requesting review of officer interaction with civilian witness statements and body cam footage. Code 7. Talia exhaled slowly. Not relief, but resolution. The storm had passed. But she knew better than to think it was over. Not really. This would ripple. Maybe it already had. As the crowd began to disperse, Cruz stepped closer, her voice low. "Captain, if you're willing, I'd like your statement. And I'd like to walk you back myself." Talia nodded once. "I'd appreciate that." Behind them, Denham still hadn't moved. Because for the first time, he knew what it felt like to be on the wrong side of a story. And worse, to know the world was watching. Cruz gave a single nod, small, respectful, resolute. "Understood," she said. Then she turned back to the crowd, lifting her voice just enough. "The situation is resolved. Thank you for staying calm. If anyone has footage or a statement to give, my partner will take them now." She gestured toward another officer who had exited the cruiser and was already pulling out a notepad, his gaze flickering between the faces in the crowd and Denham's sagging form. The energy on the street shifted, not to celebration, but to something heavier, release. Like everyone had been holding a collective breath, and now, with the verdict handed down, they could exhale. The crowd began to disperse slowly, reluctantly, as if still tethered to the gravity of what they'd just witnessed. Denham didn't move. Badge gone, weapon surrendered, He looked like the frame of a man, outline intact, but everything inside hollowed out. For the first time, he wasn't center stage. He wasn't even part of the scene anymore. Talia took one step back, then another, slow and steady. Her eyes never left Denham's face. Not out of spite, out of study, out of habit. He hadn't apologized. He wouldn't. But maybe, just maybe, he'd think twice next time he reached for power like it was owed to him. Cruz fell in beside her, and the two women walked side by side down the block, their steps quiet, measured. Behind them, the street began to stitch itself back together. Shutters lifting, conversations resuming, the buzz of phones uploading truth to timelines and group chats and inboxes where it would spark conversations Denham would never be able to mute. After a block of silence, Cruz finally spoke, voice low. "You handled that better than most of my own people would have." Talia didn't answer right away. She kept her eyes forward. "It shouldn't have to be handled at all."
Cruz nodded, jaw tight. "No.
It shouldn't." And they walked on. Two women in uniform, different wars behind them, the same battle still ahead. His own with a soft hiss. For a while, they just sat like that. No questions, no speeches, just two people letting silence do what words couldn't. The cicadas filled the gaps, their drone comforting in its consistency, like a memory that never left. Uncle Ray finally spoke, his voice low, gravel-worn. "Saw what happened. Folks been blowing up my phone since noon." Talia didn't flinch. Figured they would. He took a sip of his tea, exhaled through his nose. "You handled it like your mama would've.
Calm. Clean.
No extra mess."
She smiled faintly at that.
Mama would have smacked him with her purse. Ray chuckled, the sound like cracked leather.
"Yeah."
But only after she read him his rights. Talia let the laugh come. It was small, dry, but real. A release she hadn't known she needed. Her gaze drifted toward the magnolia again. The wind had picked up just enough to make the branches dance. "I didn't plan for it to go like that," she said. "I just wanted to walk." Ray nodded slowly. "Ain't got a plan for truth. It shows up anyway." They sat again in quiet. A car passed, slow and respectful. A couple kids rode by on bikes, tossing curious glances but saying nothing. The street had returned to itself, but Talia knew it would never be quite the same. "He lost his badge today," she murmured. "Good," Ray said. No hesitation. "Badge don't mean much if the man wearing it don't know what it stands for." Talia turned toward him. "You think it'll change anything?" Ray looked out across the street like he was measuring the years. "Maybe not everything. But someone out there saw what you did. Maybe a kid with a phone. Maybe a girl who needed to see someone stand tall without swinging. Maybe a cop who'll think twice next time. That's something." Talia leaned back on her hands, her fingers brushing the old wood of the porch. "I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired." "Bravery's not about what you feel," Ray said. "It's about what you do anyway." The sun dipped lower, brushing gold across the rooftops. Somewhere, someone turned up a radio playing Old Soul. The neighborhood exhaled. Talia closed her eyes, just for a moment, and let the stillness hold her. They sat in silence for a while. The quiet wasn't oppressive, just full of unspoken things. Finally, he broke the stillness. "You made the news." Talia's laugh was dry, a half-sound caught in her throat. "Wasn't planning on it." Ray shook his head, took a sip. "Never are, but sometimes trouble finds you anyway." She nodded slowly, her eyes still locked on the street. "Wasn't trouble, just not peace either." Ray glanced at her sideways, an eyebrow raised. "You handled yourself well, calm, precise, just like your father would have." That brought a faint smile to her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ray leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He used to say, "Strength isn't in how hard you hit, it's in how steady you stand when the world's trying to knock you down." Talia didn't respond right away. Her throat was tight, but not from anger. "I didn't come back to prove anything. I just wanted to walk. Just be." Ray nodded. "And you did. You stood your ground. A lot of people saw that. They'll remember it." She turned toward him, eyes searching. Does it ever change anything, Ray? Or do we just keep fighting the same fight over and over? He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. Small, genuine, not for show. You're asking the wrong question. She waited, and he continued. The question isn't whether you changed everything. The question is whether you changed something. Talia let his words settle, feel their weight in her chest. Maybe some kid in that crowd would grow up remembering the day a black woman in a t-shirt and boots stood taller than a badge. Maybe some young girl would watch the video online and realize she didn't have to shrink to survive. Maybe someone in uniform would hesitate before reaching for power they hadn't earned. Maybe that was enough for now. She leaned back against the wooden railing, the peeling paint brushing her shoulders, and looked up at the sky turning violet. What now? Rhea asked. Talia didn't hesitate. I keep walking. He smiled. That's my girl. And as the last of the sun disappeared behind rooftops and the streetlights flickered to life one by one, she sat there with her uncle, silent, steady, grounded. Not because the fight was over, but because she chose not to lose herself in it. Sometimes standing still is the loudest act of defiance. And sometimes, one woman standing in the middle of her own street can shift the weight of history just enough to leave a sliver of light. Not everything needs to explode to change. Sometimes, it just needs to be seen.